US-India trade relations are complex. The tariff tempest trumps trade war. In 2019, President Donald Trump, a staunch advocate for protectionist trade policies, unleashed a wave of tariffs on goods imported from various countries, including long-standing allies like India. This move, part of his America First agenda, aimed to reduce the U.S. trade deficit and protect domestic industries from what he perceived as unfair competition. India found itself caught in the crosshairs of this trade war. Trump, citing India's high tariffs and trade surplus with the U.S., imposed tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Indian goods. These tariffs targeted a wide range of products, from steel and aluminum to automotive parts and chemicals. These tariffs sent shockwaves through the Indian economy. Exporters faced the prospect of losing access to the lucrative U.S. market, while businesses reliant on imported raw materials grappled with rising costs. The tariffs threatened to derail India's economic growth and strain its relationship with a key global partner. Trade imbalances, a game of deficits and surpluses. Understanding the US-India trade dynamic requires delving into the concept of trade balances. In simple terms, a trade balance represents the difference between a country's exports and imports. When a country exports more than it imports, it has a trade surplus. Conversely, if it imports more than it exports, it has a trade deficit. The U.S. for decades has maintained a significant trade deficit with India. This means that the U.S. buys more goods and services from India than it sells to India. In 2019, for instance, the U.S. trade deficit with India stood at a substantial $25 billion. This trade imbalance has been a source of contention in US-India relations. Proponents of protectionist policies argue that trade deficits represent a loss of jobs and economic opportunities for the U.S. They contend that countries like India benefit at the expense of American workers and businesses. Section 4, Collateral Damage. Indian sectors in the crosshairs. The tariffs imposed by the Trump administration targeted a broad spectrum of Indian industries. The Indian steel and aluminum industry was hit hard, facing hefty tariffs. This made Indian metals less competitive, leading to reduced production and layoffs. The Indian pharmaceutical industry also faced potential tariffs, raising concerns about drug prices. These tariffs had a ripple effect throughout the Indian economy, impacting businesses large and small. Section 5, Concessions and Compromises. Navigating the trade battlefield. India faced U.S. tariffs and adopted a strategy to balance trade. Concessions included lowering tariffs on American goods like Harley-Davidson motorcycles. India streamlined regulations for American businesses and strengthened its intellectual property regime. However, India insisted on a fair and reciprocal trade deal. Section 6. Beyond America, India's quest for diversification. While engaging in negotiations with the U.S., India also recognized the importance of reducing its reliance on a single market. The trade war served as a wake-up call, prompting India to aggressively pursue diversification of its export markets. India turned its attention to other major economies, forging closer trade ties with countries in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Europe. Free trade agreements were negotiated and implemented, opening up new markets for Indian goods and services. This diversification strategy aimed to cushion the blow of U.S. tariffs and reduce India's vulnerability to the whims of American trade policy. By expanding its export destinations, India could spread its risk and create a more resilient and sustainable economic model. This diversification effort extended beyond traditional trading partners. India also explored opportunities in emerging markets, recognizing the potential for growth and collaboration in these rapidly developing economies. Section 7. The Long Game Charting the Future of U.S.-India Trade. The trade war initiated by the Trump administration undoubtedly strained U.S.-India relations. It exposed the underlying tensions in their trade relationship and highlighted the challenges of reconciling their diverging interests. However, it would be short-sighted to view this period solely through the lens of conflict. The trade war in many ways forced both countries to confront difficult questions and reassess their priorities. It underscored the need for a more balanced and sustainable trade relationship, one based on mutual respect and a recognition of each other's sensitivities. As the global trade landscape continues to evolve, the U.S. and India will need to find ways to navigate their differences and forge a path towards greater cooperation. This will require flexibility, pragmatism, and a willingness to compromise on both sides. The future of US-India trade relations remains uncertain. However, one thing is clear: the stakes are too high for these two global powers to remain locked in a perpetual cycle of tariffs and retaliation.